From unsolved mysteries to unexplained phenomena, from comedy gold to relationship fails, Amazon Music's got the most ad-free top podcasts, included with Prime. Because the only thing that should interrupt your listening is, well, nothing. Download the Amazon Music app today.
Hey, welcome back. It's the Energy to Heal podcast. I'm Laura. I'm your host. And on this podcast, we are talking all things Splankna. If you are new here, I am a master's level Splankna practitioner, have been for 3 years. I share somewhat early in our episodes about how Splankna basically changed my son's life and therefore changed my life and sent me on this trajectory and journey of discovering what Splankna is. And today I have a really special conversation I want to share with you. I have Sarah Thiessen with me. She is the founder of Splankna, and I want to bring you guys all the way back to where did this even come from? How was it discovered, and how long has it been around? All the questions kind of bring you back to the roots of it. So Sarah, thanks for being on here today.
Sure, glad to.
Can you just start by kind of telling people your background, where you come from professionally, and how long you've been doing Splankna for?
Yeah. So, first of all, I am the worst possible person to have developed Splankna, which I'm sure is is part of God's point. I was raised in the Church of Christ. So that is a very conservative denomination. We were unfortunately known for our refusal of instrumental music. We're talking that conservative.
Wow. Yeah.
And the absence of any women in ministry, and the fact that we tend to be real big sticklers on baptism as the point of salvation, the moment of salvation. So as you can tell, a very conservative background.
Yeah.
When I first got introduced to what eventually became Splankna, I was I was a couple years out of graduate school, so I was probably 25 or 26 and had never been even to a chiropractor, much less did I know anything about the holistic world and if anything at all like energy psychology. So how this started was I went to Abilene Christian University for college, which so I grew up in LA, and we had a recruiter who came out to our youth group. We had kind of a big known church at the time in Southern California, Long Beach Church of Christ, and recruiter came out to get us all to go to ACU. So we took a trip out there and ended up going there for school, deciding on a Bible degree undergraduate, which was so specifically a youth and family ministry, the kind of degree you get if you're going to be a youth minister. I decided that once I really didn't know what I wanted to major in or what I wanted to be when I grew up. I had always been a singer. Most of my family sings, and so I really enjoy vocal performance, and I had gone through the whole classic cliche, learn guitar your freshman year in college and write all kinds of sappy love songs, and worship songs. So I tried out being a music major first and found out really, really quickly that as soon as you make music a study and not just something to enjoy, I loathe it completely.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so very fast, I was like, oh, I'm definitely not a music major. And the only other things I was really interested, I'm passionate about my faith, always was, and was always interested in psychology, but I figured that really wasn't an option because psychology is secular. And so as soon as someone told me that there at Abilene Christian was a graduate degree in marriage and family therapy that was coming from a Christian point of view, I was like, well, that's it then. That's my thing. I'm
Mm.
sold. I'm doing that. So as soon as I found out that and made the plan, they basically told me I could declare any major undergrad. It didn't really matter. You can go into the MFT regardless. And so I said, well, then I'm going to study the Bible. So I got to be, which it's funny, at the time, being a female in a Church in Christ school in the Bible department was a bit of a coup, actually, which I know is really sad to say today, but I was one of only two women in the whole department of Bible degrees.
Wow.
So Yeah, because, women weren't expected to be in ministry. So the other one female and I were kind of spectacles. Made a little fun of it. I probably shouldn't, but I was a little bit much of a brat. In order to get the Bible degree, one of the classes, we took Greek and we took Old and New Testament and we took all of it. Well, one of the courses required for the degree was homiletics, which is preaching. And so at the end of that class, you have to give a sermon. So and which was already, there's buzz and it's kind of a thing that there's girls giving sermons because that's super not supposed to happen. So
Yeah.
I had a little bit of fun with it, and I borrowed a three-piece suit and cufflinks from a friend of mine and pulled my hair back and showed up in a tie and suit and just to be a little bit of a brat. So
So you've always had a little bit of a go with to the beat of your own drum in
a
you.
little bit of a rebel. Yeah. Marriage and family therapy graduate school. I really enjoyed, had a really good time. However, at the end of that, so that's a year-round, 2-year program. And when it was time for graduation, it hit me one day. It might have been graduation day, actually. This realization that if I was honest, here I am, I'm about to be, walk across the stage, have the hand laid on your shoulders that you are the mental health professional. And yet I really had no idea at all how to help anyone change.
Hmm.
I knew the right language for all that goes wrong. I know how to bill insurance and write up a diagnosis, but I didn't really know how to help anyone change. And it hit me. I remember I was alone in my apartment in this afternoon. None of my roommates were around, and I realized, you know what? I really don't know how to facilitate change. They didn't teach us that because they don't know.
Oh, wow.
And and it's not because they aren't very good people. The men and women who facilitated my graduate training were and still are productive in their fields. They are educated, they follow the Lord, they're competent human beings. But the field of psych in general just doesn't have a whole lot of clarity on what facilitates change.
Hmm.
We're better at identifying and predicting what goes wrong, how it goes wrong, why it goes wrong. But as far as what actually makes something better? I remember being struck by there was one style of psychology that was the closest thing I ever came across to now that might really produce change. What still is. It's strategic family therapy by Chloe Madonis, Jay Haley back in I don't know when they were around. It was a while ago, but their style of producing change was one of the only ones in all the things we read that I thought, now that might actually be productive. That might actually work. And
Hmm.
yet, what it would take to do what they were suggesting, you'd have to be a genius. I was just not smart enough. they they were geniuses. They were describing you get a gist of the patterns in a marital dynamic, let's say, or a family dynamic, and then you create a scenario in the therapy setting or in a homework assignment that that pushes those regular behavioral patterns past their normal thresholds. And
Okay.
you do that all unbeknownst to the client. You do that to sort of break them out of their automatic responses, that kind of thing, to create a new space for different reactions, different ideas, different behaviors, which again, I'm like, now that might work, especially with the examples they gave. But man, you'd have to be next level genius to figure out what kind of scenario could you create in a session environment or in homework to push those thresholds past. I mean, it was,
Too much.
yeah, well, either too much or not the way my brain was built.
Okay.
So as I was leaving graduate school, I was pretty frustrated and discouraged with how little I actually knew how to help anybody change. But still, you do the best you can do. So off I went into the field of psych. I got a job with Samaritan Counseling Center, which was my plan. I wanted to be a part of one of the national Christian group practices. Basically, the biggest ones are, I think, still are Minirth Meyer and Samaritan. So
Okay.
I got a job with Samaritan here in Denver, and the job was I was supposed to head up a new satellite office out in Lyman, Colorado, which is way out in the eastern boonies east of Denver. And the way Samaritan worked, at least at the time, was they set up satellite offices in churches, and the church commits to a financial part of that whole process. Well, so I made my way out to Denver. I was single still after undergrad and graduate, which is a whole different story. And got got out to Denver, showed up for my first day of work after coming out here a couple times to interview with them. And I got there and they said, "Oh, we're really sorry, but we don't have that job anymore." The church that I was supposed to open satellite office in had backed out of the deal for financial reasons.
And they didn't tell
So
you.
no. So I think it probably happened while I was in transit. So you got to remember that no one had cell phones yet. This is
Oh
before
yeah.
this is 19 see, I graduated undergraduate in 1990. Wait, 19 this is 1996. So yeah, this is before cell phones, this is before internet. So I think the church backed out during the few days that I was traveling, pulling my Civic behind a U-Haul to get out to Denver. So yeah, I don't think they could tell me before I showed up. So
Wow.
I showed up and they said, "We're really sorry, we don't have that job anymore." And so literally, I had just moved across the country. I was
Oh,
staying in the basement of the parents of a friend of mine that I was in graduate school with who happened to live here and was from Denver. So I was staying in their basement, and now here I am with all my stuff and no job. So
yeah.
Samaritan said, "Well, you can, if you want to stay around and help us try to find another church to start up a satellite, that'll be fine, but we can't pay you for that." So I worked with Samaritan for the next 6 months without pay,
Oh
trying to
my word.
get yeah, trying to get another job going, and I waitressed at a macaroni grill for a while because of the singing. Because back then, Macaroni Grill would have the waitresses sing opera pieces. During during restaurant hours, like, so yeah, so I learned
Singing therapist.
I know, right? I learned an opera from the three tenors, and I would sing it for tips, and yeah, it was good
Word.
times, good times. So when I was in grad school, I said to the Lord, I remember saying, I whatever you want me to do with this degree, with this life, I will do anything but adolescent inpatient.
Hmm.
I really, at the time, I'm better now, but at the time, I was not a fan of adolescents. I don't, I get too frustrated with all the entitlement. So I said, I'll do anything but that. And so, of course, here in Denver, the only degrees in the field, or I'm sorry, not degrees, the only openings in the field of psych in the whole Denver area while I was looking were adolescent inpatient.
Hmm.
So I finally took that job with Boulder County Mental Health. Up there at the time, there was a place called Halcyon. It's no longer there, but it was an elementary school turned into a treatment center where the supposedly the quote was the 10% worst kids in the state were sent.
Oh man.
And so it was day treatment. It wasn't all the way inpatient, but it was day treatment and outpatient. And so I got that job and thought to myself at the time, just because I know how the Lord works, I thought, so I'm probably going to discover that this is my great passion and I love working with adolescent inpatient. And he had to just force me against my will to show me that, I'll probably love it. I did not love it.
Oh
I
no.
was very, very frustrated again with the what I experienced as, and I realize this is not true for everyone. Okay, so I really don't mean to throw the establishment under the bus. I felt very ineffective in that job, even though my supervisor there kept saying, you're great at this, and I would say, you're out of your mind. I am not great at this. These kids are not changing.
Yeah.
There isn't difference, there isn't growth. And she looked me in the eye, I will never forget. She took both my hands and got all motherly and kind and said, "You need to lower your definition of success."
Oh wow.
And it was a turning point, I think, for me, because I I looked her back in the eye and said, No, I don't. I am not willing to lower my definition of success. I really think that people can be helped, that we can change, that we can choose better. There has got to be a better way to do this. And so I cold called one day Miners Meyer because I was trying to get my plan back on track. So the one of the great things about being at Halcyon for a year was I was able to get my licenses, was able to get all my supervised hours and everything to sit for license exams. So cold called Miners Meyer, got accidentally got the director on the line, and cold call turns warm, and they ended up hiring me again to no, that wasn't a satellite office actually. That was it's a long time ago now, so I'm having to remember. Hired me again to come work with them. And so I spent the summer training my replacement at Halcyon, the
Okay.
person who would take me over. So my last day at Halcyon, I say goodbye to all the kids that I've been working with, and I get home to my little apartment, and there's a voicemail. This is back in the days of voicemail, like actual machine that you would have to push the
Yeah.
button to play
Press
your
play.
voicemail for you. Yes. I pressed play and the voicemail said, "So we're really sorry. We really like you, but we're hiring three new people at a time and we realized we can't guarantee enough referrals for three people. We have to let somebody go and you're the only one without previous private practice experience. So we're going to have to rescind the job offer."
Oh my word.
So this is now the second time that I have felt like I get a career path started and God just slams the door. Like it felt cruel actually at the time. I was like, have I done something to you? Did I make you mad at some point along the
Yeah.
line? Why is it that every time I get anything going, you cut me off at the knees? Well, this second time, I didn't realize it the first time around until retrospect, but this second time, the very next day, the next morning, I woke up to an offer. It's too long to go into the details, but an offer for space and a referral source and an advertising setup. Basically, this whole here's a prepackaged way, go into private practice.
Whoa.
Now, I thought this can't be the lead of God. Who goes into private practice at what was I, 20, was you 22? Well, I was probably 26 and I don't have a marriage and family, and I just got my licenses, and it's just way too early and presumptuous to go into private practice. But when all of those doors opened, it occurred to me, I realized he did that last time. So a year and a half, at this point, it was about a year and a half ago, when I arrived in Denver and Samaritan said, "Sorry, we don't have that job." That next morning, all the doors opened for private practice, which I completely ignored, thinking that can't be the right direction. But
Oh,
so this was the second time he had done it. And once I realized the pattern, I said, "Okay, God, if this is what you're saying I'm supposed to do, if this is all you're going to let me do, apparently, is going to private practice, then I'm going to do it. And if I starve, it's on you."
yeah.
So that day, believe it or not, I signed a 1 year lease on an office space. I didn't, had no income. I didn't have a single client. I signed a year lease on an office space and a 3 year lease on the office space and a 1 year contract with, at the time, the Yellow Pages in Denver. It was called the Dex. The Yellow Pages, a whole year's worth of a big spec ad where instead of just your line in you would have a big box with your name and you could put an image and so
Yeah.
forth. This is how you advertised in 1996. So so I committed myself financially just ridiculously, like way beyond any logic, because it seemed like it was all he was letting me do, and because every other door shut, and because I was like, well, again, it's on you if
Yeah. So were you like sick to your stomach nervous about this, or were you like, okay, let's see what happens?
oh, I was definitely sick to my stomach for
Okay.
sure. Oh yeah, yeah. I also didn't, looking back, I wish I had had a little more faith, didn't have enough faith to just stick with that plan alone. I went out and got myself two different nannying jobs.
Oh,
I
wow.
nannied in two different households for 4 years. By the time 4 years was up, I did have a practice rolling enough to live on. And he said to me when I quit those two jobs and said goodbye to those kids, he said, "You never had to do that." And I knew at the time what he meant was, had you trusted me and jumped off that cliff, I would have made the
Yeah.
practice. You wouldn't have starved. But somehow I wasn't able to hear that in the beginning. So then I have a practice going enough to live on by that point. In the process of that, earlier. So let's see. It was right after I opened private practice. I was at church one morning and I was talking to somebody about a cough. I had this really bad sort of phlegmy morning cough that was annoying. And someone said, "Oh, you should go see Dr. Martin. He's a chiropractor. He was one of the elders at our church at the time." He said, "You should go see him. He could help with that cough." So I made an appointment with Dr. Brian Martin. I hadn't ever been to a chiropractor, didn't know anything about it. I got to the appointment and he had me lay down on my back on the chiropractic table. He said, "Hold your right arm in tight against the side of your body." And he started pulling on my wrist. And he didn't explain to me what he was doing. He just started working. So he would touch different acupuncture points on my body and see if my arm would hold strong or if it would go weak. And he would say, touch this point here and this point here and think about this age or this emotion or this memory, things like that. And I had no idea what he was doing. At the
Yeah.
end, yeah, at the end of the appointment, he said, "So how'd you find me? Who you are?" And I told him who I was and what I just got my licenses and marriage and family therapy. And he got all serious and he looked me in the eye. Everyone was always looking me in the eye in those days. Brian, Brian looks me in the eye and he goes, "You don't know it, but you really want to do this." And I said, and what he meant was whatever it was he was doing to me.
Yeah.
I said, "I really don't, but nice to meet you." I don't, I shook his hand and left, and I thought to myself, that man is a really kind Fruit Loop.
Yeah, because now I have to pay him for like moving my arm for a couple
Yeah.
minutes.
Well, and also, Laura, whatever it was he did didn't help my morning cough at all. So I
Oh,
was I was not at all impressed or
wow.
interested
I
with
never heard
anything.
that part of the story.
Oh yeah, totally useless. So that started about a year period where every single Sunday morning I would go to church and Brian would chase me down. He would find me somewhere and say something like, "Oh, here, I found this article I brought to you. I wanted you to read it." Or "Hey, have did you see that interview on CNN?" Da, da, da. Or he'd say, "There, I got to tell you about this patient who came in this story." Every single Sunday, this man would harass me trying to get me to engage on this whole mind body psych thing. And I just kept turning it all down because the only frame I had for any of that kind of thing was that it's new age witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
But not only Brian, the Lord too did one of those things where you know how when he's trying to get your attention or he's trying to show you something, he will bring it up in like 20 different directions at once. You know,
Yeah.
it was like that for that year too. Like like I would see movies and there would be a scene in a movie and it would feel like it's yelling at me about mind body, mind body, mind body. Every article I saw, every conversation I was in, every old colleague I caught up with, like it just wouldn't leave me alone from every angle. And I
Wow.
kept thinking that can't be the Lord because it's all new age witchcraft. So
Yeah.
so at the end,
I got
it
it
had been
down.
about a year, and one morning, on one Sunday morning, Brian comes up and he goes, "I know I'm always bugging you, but this is the one. This is the thing you've got to do with me. There's this 2-day training. It's right here in town. It's in Arvada, which is a little north of where we were. And it's 2 days. It's called Thought Field Therapy. It's only $300. You got to come to this training with me." And I honestly, I thought I got to get this guy off my back. And the other thing I thought was maybe God wants me to investigate and learn about this field so that I can help bring deceived people out of it.
Oh,
Is
wow. Yeah.
honestly what I thought. So I said, "Okay, I will go to this training with you." So Brian and I drive up to Arvada, about 45 minutes north or so. We show up to the address that's listed, and it is this woman's office, her private office, and he and I are the only ones who show up to this training.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah, so it's already scary, right?
The
So
fact that you have plowed through even this amount of the story and kept persisting is shocking to me.
oh, yeah. So Brian and I go in, and her name was Dr. Roberta Wilkins. I'm not sure if she's still practicing. I don't know. She takes us down to this basement underneath her office, and she says in so many words, so here's thought field therapy. It's designed by Dr. Roger Callahan, who is a chiropractor, also had a history in psychiatry, I think it was. She said, here's what you do. You have the client sit across from you and they follow you, like Simon says. They tap on little quick taps. They tap above the eyes, like at the eyebrows, then out at their temples, then underneath their eyes, above and below their mouth, under an arm, at a collarbone, so forth. Then when you get them to tap at the back of their hand, you have them do what's called the 9G sequence, where they tap at the back of their hand and they follow you while they close their eyes and open them again, circle their eyes to the left, then circle the eyes to the right. Count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then hum. And
Ugh,
this whole time while they're doing this, they tune into their phobia. And doing all this tapping and humming and everything clears the phobia, and they don't have it anymore. That's thought field therapy.
okay.
Now, I listened to that and thought, I am the dumbest human on the planet to have been roped by Brian into this ridiculous thing,
Yeah,
because
I might be thinking the same thing in your
yeah,
shoes.
this is the dumbest thing I have ever heard of. So I was just really mad that I let him push me into this. And so after that 2 days, I just dismissed it completely and went back to normal life. At the time, I had a little contract with a Catholic church down in Colorado Springs, and I would go down on Tuesdays and Thursdays and work with whatever clients they were sending. And
Okay.
I had been working with and doing traditional talk therapy. And there was a husband and wife that I had been working with for a while, some marital work, and we were closing things up because they were about to move to Hawaii with the military. And so after session, we've said our goodbyes. It's been great working with you. Blessings on you guys. They're going to leave. And she starts talking about how afraid she is to fly because she had a really bad phobia around that. So she's describing that. Now we're after session time here. So we're not on the clock. We're just kind of hanging out. And I said something really compelling like, I don't think it'll work, but I just learned this technique a couple weeks ago that supposedly is so amazing with phobias. Again, I don't think it'll work or do anything, but you want to try? And for who knows why, had to be the Lord. She was like, sure. So so I'm like, okay, it's gonna look really dumb, but hang out with me, right? So tune into your fear, feel it as strong as you can on a 1 to 10 scale. So I didn't tell her that the training said, Dr. Roberta Wilkins, she said that when the person is following you through this little sequence, the intensity of their fear is supposed to go down on a 1 to 10 scale. It's supposed to go down by about two numbers each round through. So it should go sort of down to an 8 the first time, then down to a 6, and so forth until they can't find the fear anymore. So I'm walking her through this process, and she's reporting just that. So every time we get through one round, and I ask her, so how intense can you feel it on a 1 to 10 scale? Each time she tells me about two numbers lower. And I'm
Wow.
thinking, okay, sure. So she gets down to where she can't find the fear anymore. And she says, well, but I'm not on a plane. I mean, if I was on a plane, surely I would be more afraid. And I said, yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. And and she said, well, I have another phobia that we could test. I'm terribly afraid of elevators also. And the building where we were had an elevator. And so I was like, well, okay. I mean, if you want to. So we go again. We start over again. She finds her fear of the elevator at a 10 and it goes down like it's supposed to. We get down to where she can't find the fear anymore. And so, well, you want to go try it out? And she said, okay, let's go try it out. So we're walking down the hall and we're saying whatever, we're chatting. Her husband was there with her. He had their little new, not a newborn, but she was maybe, I don't know, 10 or so months old, was asleep on his shoulder. I remember their little baby girl. We are walking down the hall and we turn a corner and we turn to where we can visually see the elevator, which is still a ways away down the hall. As soon as she sees the elevator, she crouches down on the floor in fear.
Oh, and she'd already
Yeah.
gotten to a zero
And
with
she'd
the
already gotten to
tapping.
a zero. So
Okay.
I'm standing over her there on the floor thinking, this does not look promising.
No.
No, but she's having a minor panic attack and we're in the live moment. And so I just went with it. So I said, okay, look good. Come on, look me in the eye, tap right here, keep tapping. Let me see, let me hear you breathe. Like I just keep walking her through the process. And so little by little, we go across the hall. So I don't know how long it was. It might have been half an hour, 40 minutes later or so. She is taking the elevator over and over. So her husband and I are standing there watching the little numbers, in above the elevator. She'll take the floors up and she comes back down again and the door's open and she's sort of giggling and she's like, I'm gonna go again. So she goes again, and her husband is standing next to me going, I just can't believe this. I just can't believe it. I mean, as long as I've known her, she's never been able to I can't believe it. And I'm standing next to him watching the numbers going, I can't either.
Wow.
And you would think that I would have been thrilled driving home that night, but I was not thrilled. I was upset and a little terrified because I got in the car and I was like, wait, I don't know what just happened. I don't know why that worked. I mean, Laura, I could get a Ouija board or a psychic or tarot cards to quote work if I wanted to,
Hmm.
right? Like the fact that something works doesn't mean that it's of the Lord.
Right.
And so I was really freaked out, honestly, by not knowing what I had just done, why it worked, if it even worked for his reasons, or if I had just stepped over some witchcraft line into like really dangerous areas. And all the way home, I was just like, Lord, like, I don't know what to think of what just happened. Am I in trouble? Have I discovered something? But what I knew for sure was I couldn't just walk away and dismiss what I had seen. It was too remarkable. And so that started a 7-year period where I usually describe it like I felt like he was holding me under his thumb. Like I couldn't get out of the pressing questions. Like I would wake up in the night, like, well, what about this and this and this? And instead of giving me clarity, he would say, yeah. And what about this and this and this? And I was like, oh, you're killing me.
So you mean
I-
under his thumb, like you could not get it off your mind. You were
right.
thinking about this constantly.
Day and night. I couldn't get
Wow.
out of the questions. And it was such a weird position to be in too, because there was no one to ask.
Yeah.
because because anybody who I trusted as a believer who knew the word wouldn't know what energy psych is to even discuss it, or would hear the description and go, oh, that's all off limits.
Yeah.
And anybody who understood energy psych didn't know the word. So I couldn't there was I I was I felt at least really alone in those questions, and yet he wouldn't let me out of it. And so I don't know how long it was from that night till where I committed before him, just he and I privately, that I was like, okay, I will take on this challenge. I will chase down the answers to this question. The question being, in this field of different methods called energy psychology, right? In this field, where are you? Like what belongs to the Lord, what does not. If a believer were to use methods like this and stay within good spiritual boundaries, how would that look? How would you know where the boundaries are?
Yeah.
Wherever they are, why are they where they are? How would you know when you crossed them? And so that was about 7 years of kind of fear and trembling, trial and error. I researched different methods in energy psych, looking for like what are their common themes, what are the mechanisms of change understood to be. I would search the word. Now, one of the strengths of my denomination, I gave the Church of Christ a hard time in the beginning of this interview, but one of the greatest strengths of the Church of Christ is historically there's always been a really strong emphasis on studying the scriptures, on
Mm.
knowing the word. Like the Church of Christ is known for what we call Bible Bowl, which is like memorization competitions, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. And so we just, there's a lot of emphasis there. And so I already had that grounding of a good knowledge of the scriptures to be my foundation for how to run these questions through. And yet, on the other hand, it's not like you can go find scripture and verse for quantum physics, or is there
Yeah.
a frequency to an emotion, or right, like there aren't scriptures that are anywhere close to direct discussions of these kinds of questions.
Yes.
So very little by little over a 7-year period, and clients where I had a really good bond, where we had a good attachment, I would tell them about what I was exploring and ask if they would be willing to let me guinea pig some things, try some things out. And there were a few times over those years when I would step out of boundaries, and he would be clear with me, like, nope, that's out. And there are several different ways that would happen, and those would be too long a story to go into,
Yeah.
um I would just regularly, I would just hit my face on my little Berber carpet in the office and say, I have got to be able to count on that you will hedge me in when I go wrong. When, like, if I step out of the lines, if I start trying or thinking or considering something that isn't within your design, like, I have to know that you're going to show me when I go wrong, because otherwise, how would I know?
Right.
Like, I have to be able to know you're going to do that for me, because that's my only hope. I can't lean on my own discernment, obviously, because my discernment is all fallen like everybody else's. I have to know that if I go out of bounds, you're going to hedge me back in. And only through that assurance can I keep taking these risks, keep trying to learn these things. My family was all pretty freaked out also during those years, especially my
Yeah, I
mother.
bet.
Yeah, I make the joke, but it isn't a joke, that my mom was pretty sure I was going to hell through those years, and till she read the book eventually in 2011 that helped with the apologetics of that. But
Wow.
so through those 7 years, I was not trying to create an institute that where it is today. I was just trying to obey that thumb that he had me under and see as much actual change as I could in my clients without getting in any kind of trouble with spiritual boundaries. And
At
so
what
what?
at what point
Hmm?
do you remember just being like, "Oh my word, I think I'm on to like this is." Was it the elevator moment, or were you like when was there a moment where you were just like, "This is something people need to know about."
I don't know if it was, I wasn't the one who first said that, actually. Heather was. So Heather Hughes was at church with me, same church. She went to Dr. Martin, that same chiropractor, and he was trying to work with her. She had chronic, at the time, she had pretty intense chronic ulcers, stomach ulcers, and back pain. These things were kind of debilitating for her. And so she
Mhm.
was going to Brian, trying to resolve those things. And he kept saying to her, you need to go see Sarah. At the time I was Sarah Burke. You need to go see Sarah Burke. She's doing the emotional side of this. I really think you need some emotional trauma recovery, blah, blah, blah. And so she came to work with me, and she is the one she was the first person who said, you can't be the only one doing this. You've got to teach other people how to do this, because it's not tenable that I can't get an appointment for my son. Her son, Isaac, who's now a trainer in Splankna, he was 4 maybe at the time. We were working with him, and she couldn't get in to see me for several weeks because I was booked out. And so, just out of that frustration, she was like, okay, you can't be the only one doing this. You've got to start thinking about training other people. And the way that God, again, the way he does things, where he brings it up, in 40 different directions at one time. So she's the first person who said it. And then the next day, another client said it, and then the next day, and then good friends of ours who knew what I had been working on through those years said, have you ever thought about training this? Like, from every angle at one time. And I was like, actually, I had not thought of that. And so that began a whole new season, because as developers tend to be, and I was so, so far inside of my own way of thinking of it and how I had put it together, that it was very it was very hard to explain. It was really detailed and nuanced and didn't make sense to anyone but me. The thought of, okay, how would I actually get this out on paper that it would make sense to another person? That whole process took me several years also. In fact, there were a couple times over those years when I would think I had it down, like, okay, this is a good this is a good manual. It really walks the person through, and God would get on my case. There was this one time I was in the middle of a training. It was probably the third year or so, maybe, that I had done the trainings. And there was a group of, there were 16 of them, I remember, and they had all, most of them had been clients that wanted to learn it. And in the middle of teaching, and in the middle of a sentence, the Holy Spirit breaks in on me and says, "Do you see how bad this is?" In the middle of teaching. I was like, really? You gotta say that in the middle of teaching? You couldn't wait till tonight, right? So he's like, "Do you see how circular and how confusing and how messy?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness." So later, when I got to be alone, when I was like, "Lord, what was that about?" He was like, "You don't understand. You have to get every single thought you think in the order you do it out on paper." And I was like, I thought I had that. He was like, "Oh no, not even close." So my manual at the time that had about, I don't know, had about 16 pages to it, I think. I said, "Okay, I will sit down and try and think through what is every single thought I think in what order." Got it all on paper, brought it to the Lord officially. He said, "Nope, not even close." So my 12-ish page manual made it to 30, and he said, "Not anywhere close." Made it to 60. I was like, "I got it now. I'm sure I got it." He said, "Not anywhere close." It wasn't until I got over 90 pages in the manual that he said, "There you go. Now you got it."
Wow, 12 to 90.
Yeah, which is hilarious looking back, right?
Because you didn't realize how much you were just doing out of like memory and your own
Oh,
internal
exactly.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of it was memory and some of it was, when you develop something and you're so far inside of it, you don't realize how many leaps you're making that feel intuitively obvious to you that aren't intuitively obvious to the person you're training.
Yeah, true.
And so I kept thinking, "Oh, I've covered all those leaps." And he would be like, "No, you haven't covered those leaps." So, yeah, so that was a funny process too. But that is, in a very, very long story, probably more in depth and detailed than you were looking for, the story of how this happened.
Okay, one other thing though I wanted to ask because the whole holding points on your body and feeling an emotion, what category does that fall under?
Oh, okay. So we haven't even gotten into the nuts and bolts of
The
what it actually
NET.
is. Yeah.
Can you give a how you even got to Splankna? Can you give a brief summary of like the NET part of it and then what Splankna is as a whole?
Okay. Okay, so into the nuts and bolts. So what Splankna is, the field of energy psychology is the collection of different methods of using the body's energy system. So the theoretical energy system of the body, that it's what acupuncture and chiropractic to some degree are based on. It's what all energy medicine is based on, like Ayurvedic medicine and so forth. So the theory, the loose theory in the field as a whole, both energy psych and energy medicine, is that supposedly everything has a frequency to it. If you break it down past the atom, down into quantum physical state of things, where you have waves and particles and the fluctuation between those states and so forth. If you take everything that exists and you zoom in close enough, you would get down to waves and particles, we think. Now, the whole field of quantum or subatomic physics, meaning smaller than the atom or inside the atom, the whole field of subatomic physics is technically theoretical because we don't have a way to look at it under a microscope because it's too small. So the
Mm.
reason that the field exists, considering that it's theoretical, is that it's based on the math that we do observe. And the math is very, very reliable and excellent, which is why we figure we've got to be pretty close to what goes on down there because the math is reliable is the simplest way I know how to describe it. So
Okay, so is it true to say like and when people talk about energy,
mhm.
a lot of people think that's like a spiritual word. It's a scientific word.
Right, right. So energy is the term that the physicists use to describe the unknown source of all the motion down at the subatomic level. So down inside the atom, you've got waves and particles that are fluctuating and sort of buzzing all around in what seems to be a fairly chaotic manner. And We know from macro physics, meaning the up above the atom, everything big, we know about the law of inertia, that in order to have motion, you have to have force. Well, when the physicists see, or we think we see via the math, right? All of this activity, this motion down at the center of the atom, there's no known source for all of that motion. We can't find the force. And so they just call it energy. And so, yeah, it's a physics term for the unknown source of all that subatomic motion. It's not a mystical or a spiritual term fundamentally.
Yeah.
Now, Christians get confused about that because New Age thinkers have co opted the word energy and tried to assign all sorts of mystical and spiritual meanings to it. But when we're
Yes.
talking about energy psychology and energy medicine at its scientific roots, we aren't talking about anything mystical. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
I think so many people misunderstand. I misunderstood that before I was trained in this.
oh yeah, so did I. Yeah. So since if we started with the assumption that everything has a little frequency to it way down deep at the tiniest level, it is conjectured that that is also applies to emotion, to thought, to memory. And so the theory is that we all carry in our bodies something like a walking database of every little thing we've ever known our whole lives. So every experience, every memory, every emotion, every thought, it seems to be, as far as we can tell, there's different reasons why we assume that, but seems to be sort of cataloged like a database in the body. So if that were the case, if we had a way to sort of crack open that database in any one individual, you could theoretically trace any emotional symptom back down through that life's database, back down to its ground zero, its first moment where that emotional symptom began. For instance, let's say you had somebody who's struggling with panic attacks. Theoretically, those panic attacks started in a particular moment in time in their life. And in that moment in time, there was a reason that made sense right then. There was something the person was experiencing, feeling. There was a way they interpreted that experience. They bought into, on subconscious levels, different coping strategies like panic attacks, let's say. So, what energy psych aims to do in general is different ways to address that database and to help the body let go of some of those stored frequencies behind memories and traumatic emotions, things like that. Now, that is what energy psych would be in the secular point of view. What I was doing was I was saying, okay, first of all, I understand that anything we can observe in creation is only present there to be observed if you, God, put it there, because there is no source of creation other than the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, right? We all know that as believers. So anything we can observe in creation is there because he placed it there. And there's nothing that he placed anywhere that is in and of itself evil or sinful or bad. The evil is when we take the good things he has created and distort and pervert them for all sorts of different reasons that don't align with his nature.
Yeah.
So anything we observe in creation, if we observe, for instance, the activity and apparent presence of something like an acupuncture system in the body, the if it is actually physically there, it belongs to the Lord, as everything else he created does. So the issue of spiritual boundaries doesn't lie in what we do and don't observe in creation or in the body. The issue with spiritual boundaries lies, first of all, fundamentally in who God is versus and who that therefore reflexively makes a human being. The trouble with New Age, when the New Age thinkers or the secular folks, when they read about or learn about, oh, the body seems to store emotions and memories like little frequencies. When they hear that described from science, for instance, they draw conclusions that are outside of the biblical narrative, like the most common one being that the human being actually is some form of God. That, for instance, they've done it with the law of attraction. They
Mm.
have said, so because human attention and human intention does seem to impact reality. Therefore, that means that the human being actually is sovereign. They are in total control of their lives. Everything that's ever happened to you, you have manifested, and so forth. So
Yeah.
the problem is not in the observation of whether we do or do not impact reality. The problem is in the conclusion where we try to make ourselves equal with God, where we try to take him down to our level and say that that God is not separate from us, he's not different from us, that for instance the secular thinkers will say that Jesus is just a really really good example of full human potential, that
Mhm.
anybody, if they really realized and exhibited and got in touch with their divinity enough, they would be just like Jesus. They're denying that he is fundamentally other in his full godhood, right?
Yeah.
So the spiritual boundaries and issues like this, and all issues, by the way, not just energy psych, we need to learn as believers to sift out in how we think, to sift out what we observe in creation, which is always the Lord's, to sift that out from the false conclusions and philosophies that sinful human nature tries to draw from those observations. Like the observation versus the conclusion, that is usually the kicker.
Yeah. And who gets the credit? That's what I hearing you say is like everything you just described, the humans get the credit. We're so amazing
That's true. So
as
back to
opposed to
your first
God.
question though. I didn't answer your question. So in energy psych, the all the different methods of how do you help the body let go of these stored frequencies of trauma and emotion. There's all sorts of different methods. What they all have in common is that they combine some form of what I call circuitry. So some way that you are actually connecting with or activating the actual biological setup in the body, the acupuncture system, some way that you're using the circuitry and combining it with intention. So, what the client is thinking about or remembering or imagining, that combination of circuitry plus intention or touch plus thought, that combination seems to act like a little natural prompt to
Mm.
invite the body or open up invitation, a space for the body to release a frequency of a particular emotion connected to a memory. Now, nobody knows in any field yet, including myself, nobody knows why that combination of touch and thought acts that way. No one knows why it seems to invite or make a space for or support the body to let go of one of those frequencies, but we just observe that that seems to be the case. So
That's wild because it's like,
I
how
know.
did they figure that out in the first place then?
I'm not sure actually how they did. Now, as a anybody who knows the Word of God can't help but notice the correlation, right, between these. So here the secular community is saying, look at this. We've discovered that if you combine touch and intention, something good happens toward healing. Now the believer goes, well, gee, we've been hearing Jesus say combine touch and intention
Yeah.
since he was here in the flesh, right?
Yes.
That's no big surprise to us. So yes, it does line
He
up
says,
with,
lay your
and
hands on people and pray for them.
yeah,
And
and
that is the
pray, right?
same thing.
That's touch and intention together.
Yes.
Not that I would minimize what Jesus was teaching to only this mechanism I'm talking about. I'm just saying that they do line up, they don't contradict, you know. So, so all the different styles of energy psych are some form of circuitry plus intention in different ways. And so what Splankna, what in my process, what I did, I won't go into the details of why I went to the ones I went to, but I, in my own research of the best established styles, methods of energy psych, the ones that had the best research behind them and had been around the longest and had their credibility was most established, you know, because there are plenty of them that have terrible credibility. So, of the ones that seem to have something good going on, something fruitful, I drew from those three main styles of that circuitry plus intention combination, and I put them together in Splankna. And again, I wasn't trying to create a new something. I was just trying to see my own clients change and
Yeah.
honor the Lord in the process, right? So what I drew, the three different styles I drew in, one of them comes from a very, very well established field or method called EMDR. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It is very well known, has excellent research behind it, is all embraced by the whole traditional psych talk therapy side of things. It's not considered fringe or anything. At the time it was, but it isn't anymore because they've done just a wonderful job of research and double blinds and all of that. So EMDR was designed by Dr. Francine Shapiro. She discovered that there is something really youthful and productive about stimulating the brain hemispheres back and forth, right to left. And that would be the circuitry part. And when you stimulate the brain hemispheres right to left while tuning into the trauma, there's your intention part. Those two things together really help release PTSD, especially, and it's really good with flashbacks. They've done a ton of work around veterans, post-war, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That was one of the three. That's actually the last of the three that I brought together. And it's the one that is used, believe it or not, used the least in the Splankna protocol, because the other two are, well, yeah, NET is the one we use the most. NET stands for neuro emotional technique. And it comes out of chiropractic, actually. It was designed by a husband and wife who would rather me not name them for some reason I've never quite understood
Okay.
in the chiropractic community. And their style of circuitry plus intention is what I call direct access. So the client literally just holds with one hand an acupuncture point where a particular emotional frequency is thought to be stored in the body. They hold that point, connecting that with a head point that has to do with timing and so forth. And so it's literally just a simple touch on the body that the client does on their own while tuning into that emotion in that memory. So for instance, let's say I'm storing grief from losing a loved one 6 years ago. I would hold the acupuncture point, which in this case would happen to likely be a lung acupuncture point. I would hold that point on the body while thinking about how intense that grief was when I lost a loved one, how intense it still is today. That's what we call direct access. So that is just a very, very simple way to connect the circuitry plus the intention. And then the third of the three styles that Splankna uses is, believe it or not, the tapping algorithm that I told you about at the beginning of this interview. Thought field therapy, that first training I went to that I dismissed as so ridiculous. Thought field therapy is designed by Roger Callahan, who's deceased now, but it's TFT. It's better known now actually as emotional freedom technique, as EFT. And
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
whole story of why that is. But if any of the listeners have heard of EFT, it's actually started as TFT, thought field therapy. And then EFT, Gary Craig, he just kind of simplified Callahan's work and made it all into a little bit of a thinner process applied to everything, but nobody cares. So the that third style of circuitry plus intention is what we call algorithms, what Callahan called algorithms. So instead of just holding a single acupuncture point while you think about the emotion stored there, the algorithm is a series of which to tap on different acupuncture points in a row, like a sequence where the order is thought to be what matters. So the client thinks about a particular trauma memory while they tap through those acupuncture points in a particular sequence. And the sequence is thought to be the change agent in that style.
Yeah.
So those three styles of circuitry plus intention are all sort of brought in together in the Splankna protocol. That all sounds really complicated, I know, when I describe it here verbally, but it's remarkably simple and easy actually when you see it
Yeah.
happen.
When you're the client and you're just copying someone tapping and feeling an
Hmm.
emotion. Super
Yeah,
simple.
in fact, it's so easy and simple that I will often tell. I just did this today with a client having her first session. I'll often tell someone in their first session, okay, you need to know that when you do this work for the first time, it will seem super useless. Because
Yeah.
because when you haven't done this work before, Laura, because you knew what it was like to be a client for the first time. When you haven't done this work and you are sitting with a practitioner and they say, touch this point, think about this emotion, to your logical mind, it seems like, why on earth would that do anything? But
Yes.
but then you get out into your regular life and you'll be in some moment that usually would trigger you to have a particular emotional symptomatic kind of a response. Like maybe you're in a moment where usually this kind of thing would give me an anxiety reaction. And if that's the thing you worked on in session, you're in that moment, the trigger moment shows up, and instead of having your normal anxiety response, you have just this like quiet blank stillness in your heart where there used to be this big emotional reaction. And
Yeah.
it isn't because you talked yourself out of it, it isn't because you tried really hard, like you it's just missing, like you cleaned out a file, which is exactly what Splankna does. It cleans out the file, the emotional file of our trauma memories.
Yes, I think it's so bizarre to be a practitioner who does this work day in and day out, and to not know exactly why and how it's working.
Yeah.
Like to be working in a chapter of science that we know the outcome, we don't know the reason why.
Yep. It
It's
is strange.
bizarre
Yeah.
and so cool at the same time.
I know. I know. You know, from training, Laura, I will always say when people are getting trained in this, I'll say, so you've got to get comfortable with the fact that we don't know why this works. because because I think we're just ahead of it, actually. I think probably by the time my daughters are my age, we'll have a lot better clarity about why this works and what's actually happening. But we just don't have the tools yet to watch the
Yeah.
frequency leave, you know. In fact, to my husband's point, when I way back when I met my husband and I first described all this to him, before it was named Splankna or even all the way formed or anything, he listened to my whole spiel like you guys have today. And his first thing he said was, that might work for different reasons than you think.
Hmm.
And I said, yeah, you're right. It might. That is
Yeah.
true. And to this day, that still might be true. It might work for different reasons than we think. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. And we obviously don't have time to get into there's a whole other side of Splunkna that we'll get into in a separate episode, but it's like that's just the scientific side of it, just
I
the energy
know.
psychology side of it. There's a whole spiritual
I
submission to
know.
God, binding the enemy, breaking
We
vows. It
we
is
haven't even gotten into the fun stuff.
it is literally I get almost just emotional talking about Splunkna because it is when you see someone hurting, stuck, they are struggling, and your heart goes out to them, it is so amazing to have this tool and to say, hey, can I pray for you? Can I meet with you? And to actually see their marriage get better, their life get easier, their triggers disappear, their anger melt away. It's like, I cannot believe God lets us do this,
It's
like be a
wild.
part of it.
Yeah, for the listeners, let me share one of the early stories for fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So early, when I was still in development, couple from church, same church. We had a great church back then. It kind of fizzled in later years, but it was a golden age for our church back then.
Yeah.
Anyway, a couple brought in their, I think she was, well, she couldn't have been two yet. So she was their little one. She was crawling, not talking. I think she was barely walking. And they brought her in because she was banging her head on the floor. They couldn't get her to stop. And she had pulled all of her hair out.
Oh,
And I know, right? Poor little one. And
yeah.
obviously she's pre-verbal, so they can't say, baby, what's wrong? Right? We we did what we do in Splankna. We brought her before the Lord and we said, so Lord God, we do not know what is going on here, but you do. So we are asking, will you search through her database, everything she carries and her experience? Would you mark for us ground zero? What's the root of this issue for her? We went through our steps like we do in Splankna. I won't go into in this interview what the trauma was, but it was in the womb for her. It was a trauma she had had in the womb, and which her parents knew about. And we cleared those emotions like we do. We broke agreement with these symptoms that she had agreed to bang her head, to punish herself, to pull her hair out. Those were things offered by the enemy as a way to do penance. We broke
Mm.
those. All of this we did in one session, one sitting, and she never pulled her hair out or beat her head on the floor again, even once.
Oh
She
my Lord.
is
That's
she is
amazing.
now in her, I think she's almost 30 now. She'd have to be since, yeah. So, and it was just a resolved issue in a single sitting. And you're thinking, Now, I could have done talk therapy. I could have worked through marriage and family therapy kind of methods, which again, definitely are effective in some cases and have their place. I do not dog it as bad work by any means, right? I was just passionate then and still am now for that kind of measurable and fast, permanent change. I couldn't have talked my way into that in probably still not to today.
No, and the other thing I think of is what would that little girl's life be like if, if she's 25 years old now, like her whole life, she has this subconscious program running in her telling her she deserves punishment.
Right.
How would that have played out for 25 years had it not been resolved at age 2?
I know. And how wonderful not to have to find out.
Seriously. Yeah. Okay. We have covered so much good ground that thank you. Like the origin story of Splankna. Not a lot of people know that, get to hear it. And I'm thinking of people like my brother-in-law who he loves all the context. He wants to know all the things. Those kind of audience members, they're going to love knowing all the details of where this came from. I want to thank you for being here and just thank you for going through 7 years of being under the thumb, as you call it, of God putting this on your heart. Thank you for going through all this. I'm the only person who's combining this with Christianity and I don't have anyone to ask and I'm pioneering this thing. Like this has blessed my life and I know thousands of other people's lives. And I am so grateful that you powered through, which I can only imagine some of those years were very difficult putting this together. And it's like you chopped through the rainforest with your machete, chop after chop, and then we just get to walk through this nicely paved path through the rainforest, and it's just such a blessing. So thank you.
I have felt so privileged and blessed by getting to be the one to take that path too. So, yes, I am grateful too.
All right, and I'll just wrap it up with this. You guys hear me say this often, but if you want any more information, Splankna's got a website. They've got a book that you heard Sarah mention, splankna.com. You can find testimonies and stories of all the different kinds of ways this modality, this tool has been used by the Lord to help set people free. There's also a training coming up in October. So if you heard this and your heart is pounding and something in you is just resonating, the voice of the Lord is telling you, perking your ears up to this. The next training is in October of 2025, and you can sign up for that on the website as well.
At the website, you can find your own practitioner. We've got them all over the country, and you can experience Splankna for yourself.
Yes, and if you don't have one in your area, there's something that Splankna calls Listening Prayer Certified, which just is a way of saying they can do virtual sessions. So don't be discouraged. Don't stop. If there's no one in your area, reach out and connect with someone who is Listening Prayer Certified and go ahead and experience that for yourself. We'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you.
Fall is all about cozy comforts, but when you're prioritizing your health, it's easy to feel like you're missing out. With Hero Bread, you can enjoy all your fall favorites because they're made with Hero Bread sliced bread loaves, tortillas, bagels, dinner rolls, and more. Try their all-new Hero Noodles with 12 grams of protein and just 80 calories. So skip replacing every carb with cauliflower and indulge in your breakfast, lunch, and dinner time favorites while still hitting your goals. From breakfast bagels and meal prepped enchiladas to mouth-watering burgers and cheesy noodles. You won't believe Hero Bread's options have 0 to 5 grams net carbs and are high fiber from the taste and texture. They've even got small batch drops of indulgent favorites like the popular Hero Croissant. And right now, Hero Bread is offering 10% off your order. Go to hero.co and use code FALL25 at checkout. That's fall25 at hero.co. All figures are per serving of Hero Bread. Contains 2 to 18 grams of fat per serving. See the product nutrition panels on hero.co for more information.